Hi, this is Regeline Sabat, also known as Gigi. You're listening to Walk With Me podcast. My guest today is Stephanie Graham. Stephanie Graham is the owner of Graham Estate Planning. Stephanie is licensed to practice in New York, New Jersey, and Georgia, and relocated to Georgia 15 years ago. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you, Regeline. Thank you for having me today. I am grateful to be here and to share my story.
You're welcome. It's an honor to have you here today. Now, why don't you start off by telling us about you and where you are from?
So I am originally from New York. Depending on who you ask, I grew up partly in New York and was born in New York and grew up partly in Charleston, South Carolina. I attended college in New York and attended law school in Pennsylvania. Very strange story. I just simply wanted to go to a smaller school, which did not exist within New York, and relocated here about 15 years ago.
Absolutely amazing. Now, tell us more about your company, Graham Estate Planning.
So Graham Estate Planning was born after several instances of being underpaid and underemployed in Georgia. So I relocated here in 2005 with a 6-month-old, and I did not know but one person. And I went back to work probably when she was almost 2 years old with a prominent law firm. And then thereafter, when they ran out of work, I hate to say it, but I felt like I was forced to go back into prosecuting, which is what I did in New York. And I loved it in New York, but it's very different here in Georgia than it was in New York. But no one else would hire me. They basically said that I had too much experience or I was overqualified every time I contracted myself out. So I was hired at the district attorney's office. In fact, I was interviewing with the district attorney's office as well as the attorney's office. And the Fulton County Attorney's Office could not make a decision between me and another young lady, even though I had 3 licenses. And so I made the decision for them and withdrew my name and accepted the position with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, because at that point I just needed a job. And I worked there for about 5.5 years. I had a major car accident while I was employed there, and basically changed my life. I lost my courtroom and was placed on weekend shifts because I don't know why, but I had to have surgery on my leg 2 years later. So I got the impression that they didn't believe I was hurt. So I lost my courtroom and lost my office and was placed on weekend shifts. But I was there in the non-complex unit, which is the unit where baby lawyers basically starts. And I was in there for about 2 years. And once I obtained my courtroom is when I got hurt about a year later. And when I asked for help, among some other things that were going on, that's when I lost my courtroom. So thereafter, I eventually left on my own because I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I took a part-time gig with out in the local courts where, the cities incorporate and have to hire their own attorneys to handle the traffic prosecution. Okay. So I did that for about a year. And then I took another full-time job after a year, because quite frankly, I have a daughter and I panicked when the hours changed. So I took another full-time job with a government agency. And I knew within 4 weeks that it was not a good fit for me. But I didn't want to quit another job. So I hung in there for about a year. And again, I was underpaid and underemployed, and I was hired with the understanding of one thing, and then 6 weeks later they changed the whole dynamics, and in the end we just had to come to an agreement. And so thereafter, let me back up a little bit. While that was happening, my grandmother actually passed away, I think about 4 months into that job, and they told me that I didn't have any time to take off for my grandmother's funeral. So I basically said, you do what you have to do, and I'm going to do what I have to do. And I went to my grandmother's funeral. So when I eventually left that job, I had to sit there and think about what I wanted to do. I did not want to take another W-2 job because it just was not working out for me. Sat down and had a conversation with myself about why I went to law school in the first place, in conjunction with my grandmother passing away without a will. And Graham Estate Planning was born 6 months later, because it's actually why I went to law school. But with everything happening, I kind of forgot. I worked in banking for 6 years, where I observed these situations where older women would come into the bank with their powers of attorneys, but their powers of attorneys, for whatever reason, was always like the favorite grandchild. And so you know what that means. They weren't responsible. They just took grandma's money. And I would go to my bank supervisor, who I'm very close with today, and I would ask him, well, how were they able to do that? And he would say, because that's their power of attorney. And it never made any sense to me. So that's what I had in my mind when I went to law school. But law school was an extraordinary experience. It was a good experience for me, but I was the older student. I was about 5 years older than everyone else. So I was exposed to all of these other areas of law, became very interested in employment law, for which even today they still won't hire you without experience. Didn't even think about having to argue and post, having arguments in court. I never even thought about it. I just thought about research and writing. I never thought about being the face of anything, and ended up being the moot court chair after I thought I was going to drop out because public speaking absolutely terrified me. I mean, I would literally get sick before every performance. And in the end, I ended up training the first years and the second years in the end, and received a lot of accolades by the time I graduated. But once I graduated, I could not find a job. So that's how I got my first job with the district attorney's office. Attorney's offices typically hire attorneys with no experience. And I loved it. I moved pretty quickly there, but I don't know, the New York experience to me is different. Other people may disagree, but that was my experience. I received a promotion to like a team leader, where I became the liaison between my unit and the courthouse. And I had to assign 300 cases a week to 10 prosecutors. I had to train those prosecutors. But after about 3.5 years, I left that because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as a prosecutor. I'm the type of person, I can't do the same thing over and over again. So I went to a private practice firm, which was actually prominently family law, about 60 to 70%. But I was hired to litigate, and I advised them that if they ever gave me a family law case, that I was going to quit. So they didn't. And I had the pleasure of working in commercial litigation, dissolving partnership dissolutions, and antitrust, which was a lot of fun. And then fast forward, I go through a divorce, a very traumatizing divorce, quite frankly, relocated to South Carolina for 2 years, and then to Georgia. And it was a whole different experience. So I was being groomed for a judge in New York at 31. Then I come here and I run into people telling me I'm not ready, or I'm too young, or all types of excuses. So neither here nor there. I came to the conclusion with everything that I'd gone through that God had a different plan for me. If I had had the perfect experience at the other jobs that I had here, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I've never been happier. So I love my practice. It seems like I have a natural, a natural niche for it. And my clients are able to relate to me because I've basically been through the same things they've gone through, except for maybe the second wife part. And I say that because that's where you have the heavy probate problems, is the remarriages and the blended families. But I'm the oldest, I'm the oldest of, 3 siblings. I am a mom. I am an ex-wife. So I can relate to all of the stories when people come through my door. I can relate to everything, including, the job changes, income changes. I can relate to everything. And I'm very open. I'm always told I'm just not the typical attorney. That's my story.
That is fantastic. Now, our friend here, Renata, says Stephanie is amazing.
Thank you, Renata.
Yes, and thank you for tuning in. Now, Stephanie, you mentioned divorce. Tell us more about how you overcame that obstacle in your life. For those that are listening now who may have gone through the same thing, or who may even go through it one day, what's the best piece of advice that you would give to them to never give up?
I think the best advice I would give is to be true to yourself. If you're true to yourself, whatever the universe has for you will come to light eventually. And I think when I got married, I was not that young. I think I was 29 or 30, but I was in school the entire time. And when I first went to college, people who know me are not aware of this, but I was terribly, terribly shy. Like terribly, terribly shy. I wouldn't talk to anyone. I wouldn't go out anywhere and talk. Like I said, I considered dropping out of law school when they told me I had to do this thing called moot court. And I was like, what? So, but I didn't. We got married because we were, college sweethearts, but we really had nothing in common. It was like the whole time we were dating, I was in school, college, and then law school. And then I looked up one day after my career was established, and I said, "Oh, we're still, dating." And so when we got married and everything, it didn't feel right, and everybody kept saying, "Oh, it's just wedding jitters," and you two look good together, but it didn't feel right, and I did not feel true to myself, and in the end, I mean, I had a very good life on the surface, had everything I could possibly want, materialistically, but I don't think either one of us were very happy. We were just different people. And I had my first car accident, which caused me to have panic attacks, because when you can see what's about to happen to you, it causes a whole different set of problems. Like if you're a drunk driver and you have a car accident, you pretty much will walk away unscathed because you're not really lucid as to what's about to happen. But when you see it's more traumatizing. So that traumatized me for some time, and I could not get better. They couldn't figure out why I was not getting better from this accident. After 5 months and 6 months, my symptoms just started getting worse, and I couldn't sleep. They had me on so many different medications to try to soothe my pain, and to help me sleep. And it would work for a little while, but in the end, nothing worked. And what we soon discovered by happenstance, because of circumstances going on in both our lives, me and my ex-husband, is that, quite frankly, I was under a lot of stress. So I thought it was the job, and I left the job, right? And then I was home alone with him for a couple of weeks. And I started to see things that I couldn't see before. And quite frankly, I will tell you, literally, I said, "Oh my God, it wasn't the job, it's you." It wasn't the job at all. It was him, but I didn't know that until after I left the job. And then he had a planned trip, even though, he had a planned trip. He left town, and I went to my mom. And I think within 45 days of leaving, I left the job first. 30 days later, I left him and I left New York. And within 45 days, where all these problems that I had been having for the last 7 to 9 months, where they wanted to put a plate in my neck. That's how bad it was. I was in traction. Within 45 days of leaving, I fully recovered physically. And we came to the conclusion that I was under a tremendous amount of stress in that household. I could not. So the person who went to college and the person who graduated and became the team leader was two different people. And I was not permitted to be my true self in that household. So I had to leave to be born, quite frankly. That's how I took it. I had to leave to be born again, and pretty much rediscovered myself. And so that's why I say be true to yourself, because if you're not true to yourself, your body is going to tell you. Whether you start developing fibroids, heart problems, headaches, that is your body telling you that something is not right. And I remember years ago, Oprah, I can't remember what her special was about, but it was years ago. And she said, God will give you a warning, and he will nudge you, he will tap you, and he will push you. But when you don't listen, he will eventually push a brick wall on top of you until you get it. It's kind of like that story in the moat where somebody is stuck out, in the water, and he keeps saying, "Well, God, I was waiting for you." And he said, "I sent you a boat. I sent you this. I sent you that." And the person just ignore them. Yeah, that was his nudging and his pushing. And until a wall falls on top of you, you don't get it. So that's pretty much what happened to me. And so now I listen intensely to my body. Like even when I left that first district attorney's job, my supervisor was just an unreasonable person. Everybody knows who she is, everybody who knows me, but she just was going at me one day. And while she was going at me, I just sat there talking to God, and I slept on it for one night. And on Monday I resigned. I said, I cannot do this anymore with someone treating me like I'm a 5-year-old child. And I didn't have a job. People didn't realize that. I was there for 5.5 years. And when I resigned, I did not have a job. People had no idea. I've been trying to find a job for 3 years, and no one would hire me. So I quit on a Monday. And by Friday, I had 3 job offers. And I didn't give it the 2 weeks notice, only because it was Christmas break. And what my supervisor knew, and most people there didn't know, is that every time I was forced to work, the weekends and the holidays, which was on a regular basis with her, I actually had to drive to South Carolina for my mom to watch my child so I could drive back to court and cover my shift. So in order to give them that 2 weeks notice, that is what I was going to have to do. I was going to have to, and remember that, well, that year, I think Christmas fell like on a Wednesday. And so they were giving us like Wednesday and Thursday, and then you had to come back on Friday. And I was actually going to do it because that's how diligent I am about my job. And someone sat me down and said, Stephanie, just think about what you are going to put yourself through just so you can put in that 2 weeks notice of a jet, took your courtroom away and put you in the complaint room weekends. So I gave them 1 week's notice. And so that's how that happened. And I ended up with 3 job offers and ended up taking the one part-time offer because the other offers required me to leave. One was for Savannah, and I can't remember where the other. And I said, well, you know what, I'm going to try this part-time gig. And that was the part-time solicitor, which I ended up doing for about 4 years. And I loved it until I wanted to devote full-time to my practice.
Very powerful. I love it. Now, Renata says, this is so true. Our physical discomfort is a huge message.
Mm-hmm.
Very powerful.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. Now, Stephanie, tell us more about the major challenge you had to overcome in your life.
Ooh, other than what I just said, let me see. I think it was starting my practice because I never saw myself as a solo practitioner. Even when I went to law school, I mean, I had this silly vision of my name, being up like, most kids, my name was going to be out there on lights and I'd probably own some property, whatever, but I never thought about owning a business. Even though my mother owns 2 businesses, I never saw myself doing it because I know how much work it is. And, the practice of law, there are so many balls in the air that you have to carry, which is why some people stop doing it after some time because it's a lot and it can be scary. But I think that was the biggest for me. And, it just happened because I refused to go back into the employment world again and be treated the way I've been treated for so many years with my experience. And I think the biggest challenge maybe was getting out and letting people get to know me because I don't want to say I had an attitude, but I came here with a 6-month-old, and I think it wasn't until about 9 months ago. So I've been fully solo probably about 18 months now. And I think it wasn't until about 6 to 9 months ago that I realized that I'd been in survival mode for 10 years because, I didn't socialize. People thought I wasn't friendly and I wasn't this at the jobs. But what they didn't understand, I have no family here, not someone that I could call to pick up my daughter. So if I could not be out past 6 o'clock for anyone who has children. You have to pick up your kids by 6 or they start charging $1 a minute. And, some places will shut down the lights on you. So I think I'd been in survival mode until I started my practice pretty much. And then I was able to relax a little bit. I kind of started it because I put her in private school. And then private school rules are a little different than public school. So an incident can happen, out of the blue on a Wednesday, and the school will call you and say, hey, we're shutting down. and you have to get there to pick up your kid. That's pretty much how I started the contract part-time thing, is because I needed to pick up my kid. There was no one I could call to pick up my child. And so then when I started the practice, full time, and realizing I had to, get out there and get people, have people know me, because I think it didn't occur to me until my first coach that people knew me as a prosecutor for so long. No one knew what I was doing. So I couldn't understand why I couldn't get any business, blah, blah, blah. And I hadn't told anyone. I didn't have this grand opening like you should. I didn't even realize how important that was. So I really had to shift, and I had to stop being so private. And I had to get out there and let people know me. And it's still a little scary. You get, some interesting requests sometimes, and people make comments, but I guess that's the price you pay for being an entrepreneur. And for me, I think that was the biggest challenge, having to come out of my shell and letting people get to know the real me, so that they can come to my practice as well. But it was mostly finally letting people get to see the real me. Like now, constantly I'm receiving comments about glowing and how happy I am. And I hadn't noticed the difference before and after, but I guess I do notice it now, that people pointed out. And I knew I was miserable in the district attorney's office. I knew that because when I was invited out, I wouldn't go because I knew I was miserable. I knew I was miserable to be around.
Amazing. You went from being an introvert to now an extrovert. and
Yes.
owning your own law office. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. Now, you have a question from the audience here. Justin Crane says, I wonder if she has any battles for her soul, because I can tell by her choice of words she's been through the temptations of life, or better yet, life's test.
Wow, that's a profound question. Um, I would say probably yes in the district attorney's office, because you do have the balance of the two worlds. You certainly need both sides to have that balance. And the bigger challenge for an African American prosecutor is African Americans look at us as putting our own people away, so to speak, but we're not the ones committing the crimes. Um, and the job as a prosecutor is supposed to be about justice. It's not supposed to be about notches on your belt. It's supposed to be about justice. So if I receive a case as a prosecutor, well, I know that this is not the right person. We charged the wrong person, or the police. It is my duty to investigate that and pull that out. I should not be charging somebody going forward on a case that I know that this person couldn't possibly do it. For instance, I had a case where a young man who was probably shorter than me, and I'm only 5'4", and he said the suspect who robbed him was his height. Well, he was about 5'1", 5'2", and the person we had in custody was about 6'3", 6'5". And that put my alert on right away. And then within 48 hours of me receiving the case, the young man came in to say, I think we have the wrong person. And long story short, I had to go through a lot just to get that man released, even though it was the wrong person. And one of the police officers even cursed me out because he said, all we ever do is let people go. Well, it was the wrong person. You arrested the wrong person, and even the victim said so. But yeah, so you have those battles. But I think I held on to mine. I prayed fiercely, and someone posted a joke earlier about having the Bible in your office. And he said, you have to have a Bible to keep Jesus. And that's exactly what I said in my office. I kept my Bible on my desk when I worked in the district attorney's office, just to remember who I was. And sometimes I had to, shut that door and pray in order to survive there for 5.5 years. And that's my experience. I'm speaking from, I cannot speak to other people's experience. It is great experience to be a prosecutor because it will prepare you for any challenges you may have in life. But when I did it when I was a prosecutor in the Bronx, they put you in a classroom and train you for 30 days. You can't come out into the courtroom by yourself until you sat in that classroom. Here is completely different. It's completely different. And I'm even this day after 15 years, I'm still blown away by the way it's done here. And so, which is why I could not, it was just very difficult, very different the way they do it here. Like in New York, the defendants are allowed to testify before the grand jury. Their attorney is allowed to be present, even though the attorney can't ask questions. Here, no, ma'am. Mm-mm.
Very powerful. Now, Justin says choosing good, God over evil, the devil, is the ultimate test that he was referring to. He says he's this, so I like to know who's a firm believer. So the question is, are you a believer?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a believer. I don't think I ever had to choose between the two. In my opinion, I always did the right thing. I always did the right thing, and I always choose to be on the side of God and Jesus. And I think your career doesn't identify you one way or the other. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. It does. Absolutely amazing. Now, what gives you the most happiness in your life, Stephanie?
Wow. I'm ashamed to say that the first thing that comes to mind is my job, because it just comes so natural to me. Of course, I love my daughter to death, and I probably drown her in too much of everything. But I don't know, it just comes so natural. I just love helping people, and I'm helping, now I can pick who I want to work for. I can pick who I want to help, whereas before I never had that choice. And not everyone is for everyone, regardless of what you do. And so I love the ability of saying, yes, I want to work with this person, but I don't think this person is a good fit. But just because you're not a good fit for me doesn't mean that I don't know someone who isn't a good fit for you. I refer cases out every week on a regular basis. I'm not above letting go of a case that's too far above me. I'm not above letting go of a case that I try to stay in my lane. I'm a former prosecutor, and I know criminal law, and I help out in various ways regarding criminals sometimes. But outside of that, I'm an estate planning and probate attorney. And anything outside of that, if it's not related to estate planning, I am sending it to somebody else who specializes in that field. And
That is amazing.
a lot of attorneys do that, but yeah, that's my goal. I just want to specialize in estate planning and probate.
I love it. And you are working in that field.
I
Love
am.
it. Yes,
Absolutely.
ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is your best advice for walking with purpose and living a life of happiness to the audience?
My best advice, other than being true to yourself, is, like you said, do the things that make you happy. I think it was Lisa mentioning scripting earlier, and I remember someone else, I can't remember his name, that you interviewed that mentioned just saying out loud what you want. This may be silly, but I have Post-its all over the place. when I decide I'm going to make, I told somebody the other day, I said, oh, I have 2 more months to make another 40,000. He said, that's bold. I said, it's very bold. That's why I'm saying it out loud, because I'm going to make it happen. He said, you're going to make $40,000 in 2 months. I said, yep. So you have to be very bold about what you want and put it out there. You can't keep it inside. You have to put it out to the universe, put it out to God. And that's what I do. I talk to God and the dog all day. And I say, make your desires known, and not just to yourself, because there's probably somebody who will help you get there, but they don't know if you don't tell them. And that's something I had to learn. It's a struggle for women in general to ask for help. And we need to get into the habit of asking for help sometimes, because otherwise it will, be the experience that I had where I knew this wasn't right, but I didn't have anybody around me who would tell me the truth. It's been years that people don't tell me the truth. I don't know if it's because of what I do for a living. Because I run it. I was just thinking about that earlier. I said, oh, I have to work with this person again because she's not afraid to tell me the truth about myself. I don't want to be around someone who's going to yes me to death, because I'm never going to grow that way. And I'm all about growing every day. So I say surround yourself with people who are like-minded, who have similar mindsets, and who encourage you to grow. But if you're the smartest person in the room, I think everybody knows you're in the wrong room.
That's right. Now, you mentioned mindset. I love talking about the mindset. So let's talk about that for a moment. How important is it to maintain a resilient mindset and to be able to bounce back after a major challenge happens in your life?
Oh, it is extremely important. And I have to say, I still struggle with that, but I'm much better now than I used to be. Because you have to see the silver lining, like for instance, this pandemic, a lot of people naturally panic and, expected not to make money. And again, I'm not judging anyone, but the pandemic has also brought a lot of things to light, like for all of us who, going out to these multiple meetings in person all the time, driving from one end of town to the other for what might be a 20-minute drive that turns into an hour because of the traffic. Well, look at the amazing businesses that have been birthed as a result of the pandemic. And now you have a new department, I forgot the name, but for people who are working remotely now, for companies who would never do it before, they now had to hire a director now, right, to manage those remote people, because you still need to have some type of compliance there. And then look at the number of entrepreneur and other businesses that have been born as a result. Look at all the changes that have come about because of the pandemic. So yes, we have this social distancing thing and the mask, which drives us all crazy, because quite frankly, I developed, they ask you these questions about sore throat every time you go somewhere. I get a sore throat every time I have to have a conversation more than 2 minutes in the mask. It just puts an additional strain on my throat, but I know I'm not sick. It's just a strain from speaking on the mask. But I just think so many good things have come out of this. Yes, we've lost a lot of people, and we will probably continue to lose a lot of people. And someone close to us is probably going to get it. I don't know anybody personally yet, but I know some who've been testing. But there's also a silver lining. So I say, look for the silver lining in all of the challenges. Even if it was something that was hurtful for you or to you, there is a silver lining. There was a lesson there you needed to obtain that maybe you hadn't gotten that lesson before. Even with your friends, your challenges with work, anything, there's a silver line. There's something that comes out of it. Because I sit and I think, what would have happened if I just loved all these other jobs? What would happen? Graham estate planning would never have happened for a fact. It would never have happened if I was so happy at those other jobs. But clearly, I believe this is where God wanted me to be, quite frankly. And I have a lot of opportunities now that I didn't have before, which is hysterical, but I don't feel moved to accept those. So I'm not afraid to say yes, but I know what doesn't fit me, if that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am. Very powerful. Stephanie, thank you so much for being a guest on Walk With Me podcast. I truly appreciate you. Now, where can the audience find you?
So the audience can find me on Facebook. Graham Estate Planning business page as well as my personal page, Stephanie P. Graham. My website is also Graham Estate Planning. If you just type it in, I should pop up at least on the front page. I'm also on LinkedIn. I have a lot of fun on LinkedIn. But obviously, they're different. But LinkedIn is where I try to educate people a little more about estate planning, because people would be really surprised about the different nuances of your life that affects every aspect of estate planning. So, and my number is 888-41-WILLS. That's 888-41-WILLS. So it's pretty easy to remember. And I still answer that phone for now.
I love it. And say that again for us, for the audience.
888-41-WILLS, WILLS. So that's 1-888-419-4557, GrahamEstatePlanning.com.
I love it. And now, ladies and gentlemen, make sure to check out Stephanie at GrahamEstatePlanning.com. And Stephanie, again, thank you so much for being a guest on Walk With Me podcast. You have a blessed day.
Thank you. You too, Gigi. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Likewise.